The president of Iran just issued a warning that sent shockwaves across the Middle East. If it doesn't rain soon, Tehran might need to be evacuated. We're talking about 10 million people forced to leave their capital because there's no water left. Meanwhile, Iraq's legendary rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates that once birthed entire civilizations, are now running at half their historical flow. Farmers in Basra are being forced to drink water so salty it burns their throats. Syria's fields, which used to feed millions, now produce nothing but dust storms that choke entire villages. Jordan has become the second most water-scarce country on the planet. Yemen's water is literally worth more than its oil reserves. But right in the middle of all this chaos, one country is thriving. Not just surviving, actually thriving. They're growing crops in the desert, exporting water to their neighbors, and their taps never run dry. That country is Israel. And while some call it a miracle of innovation, others are asking uncomfortable questions about the real cost of this success. If you want to discover the shocking truth about how water is reshaping power in the Middle East, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Trust me, what's coming next will blow your mind. The Middle East water crisis isn't some distant future threat anymore. It's happening right now, and it's brutal. Iran's reservoirs are sitting nearly empty, with groundwater levels collapsing faster than scientists predicted. The government's own officials admitted they've been drilling wells so aggressively that entire aquifers are being drained dry. Some reports suggest corruption and mismanagement by groups profiting from water projects have made things exponentially worse. They call them the water mafia, and rumors claim these networks have more power than anyone wants to admit. Iraq's situation is just as desperate. The Tigris and Euphrates, rivers mentioned in ancient texts as the lifeblood of humanity, are dying. Upstream dams in Turkey and Iran have choked the flow, and climate change has done the rest. Agricultural regions that fed the country for thousands of years are now abandoned. People are migrating to cities that can't support them, creating a humanitarian disaster that gets worse every year. Jordan, squeezed between conflicts and climate disasters, has watched its water supplies shrink to almost nothing. The country now ranks as one of the world's most water-poor nations per capita. And Syria? After more than a decade of war, the drought has turned a bad situation into a nightmare. What was once fertile farmland is now a wasteland, and food scarcity is pushing people to the edge. But here's where things get interesting. While all this is unfolding, Israel is producing more water than it actually needs. Israel's transformation is almost hard to believe. A country where more than half the land is desert, where rainfall in the south barely hits 20 millimeters a year, now has so much water they're pumping the excess back into natural reserves. How did they pull this off? The answer is desalination on a scale most countries haven't even attempted. Today, Israel converts roughly 2 million cubic meters of Mediterranean seawater into fresh drinking water every single day. That's about 80% of all the water flowing through household taps across the country. The rest comes from an even more impressive source, recycled wastewater. Nearly 94% of Israel's sewage is collected, treated, and reused, with 87% of that going straight to agriculture. No other nation on Earth comes close to those numbers. And just when you thought they'd reached their peak, they completed something even bigger. In 2024, the Sorek 2 desalination plant went fully operational. This facility alone boosted Israel's total desalination capacity by 35%, and it's producing water more efficiently than any plant before it. They're not just meeting current demand. They're preparing for decades of population growth and agricultural expansion. This isn't just about drinking water either. Israel is now selling water to Jordan through agreements that have reshaped regional politics. They've become the one reliable water source in a region where droughts are getting longer and rivers are running dry. Some call it cooperation. Others see it as leverage. Before we go any further, make sure you're subscribed because the next part reveals the environmental controversy that Israel doesn't want you talking about. Here's what the success stories don't tell you. Every liter of fresh water that comes out of a desalination plant leaves behind something toxic: brine. This isn't just salty water, it's a concentrated chemical cocktail with twice the salt content of normal seawater, plus residues from the treatment process. And Israel is dumping millions of cubic meters of this stuff directly into the Mediterranean. Marine biologists have been sounding the alarm for years. Studies show that long-term brine discharge is damaging ecosystems near desalination outflows. Fish populations decline, coral systems struggle, and the entire food chain gets disrupted. The Mediterranean is a relatively enclosed sea, which means this pollution doesn't just disappear. It accumulates. Some scientists warn that if desalination keeps expanding across the region, we could be looking at permanent ecological damage on a massive scale. Then there's the energy problem. Desalination plants are power-hungry beasts. Running these facilities requires massive amounts of electricity, and much of that still comes from fossil fuels. Critics point out the irony. Israel is solving one environmental crisis while potentially fueling another. The carbon footprint of their water system is enormous, and as climate change accelerates, that creates a vicious cycle. There's also a vulnerability nobody likes to talk about. Israel has built all 5 of its mega desalination plants along a single stretch of Mediterranean coastline. Experts have raised concerns about what happens if a natural disaster strikes. A major earthquake, a tsunami, or even a targeted attack could cripple the entire system in one blow. For a country that treats water as a matter of national security, having all your infrastructure in one place seems like a risky bet. And here's something even stranger. The desalinated water that comes out of these plants is so pure that it's almost too clean. It lacks the natural minerals found in groundwater, which has led to unexpected problems. Pipes across the country have started corroding faster because the water is chemically aggressive. Infrastructure repairs are piling up, adding yet another cost to the system. Israel's water abundance has given them something their neighbors desperately need, and that's changed the political game entirely. In 2022, Israel, Jordan, and the UAE signed a controversial deal that raised eyebrows across the region. Israel would supply water to Jordan, and in return, Jordan and the UAE would provide solar energy to Israel. On paper, it sounds like a win-win, but dig a little deeper and the power dynamics get uncomfortable. Jordan is in a tough spot. As one of the most water-scarce nations on Earth, they don't have many options. They've been buying water from Israel for years under previous agreements, and they keep extending these deals even when political relations are strained. After tensions flared in 2024 over regional conflicts, Jordan still renewed their water-sharing agreement with Israel because they literally had no choice. Reports suggest they're now more dependent on Israeli water than ever before. Some analysts argue this isn't cooperation, it's leverage. When one country controls a resource as essential as water, they hold power over their neighbor's survival. There's been speculation that Israel's water dominance is intentional, a strategic move to secure long-term influence in a volatile region. Others push back, saying this is just pragmatic resource management in a crisis zone. Either way, the message is clear. Water is the new oil in the Middle East, and whoever controls it controls the future. All of this innovation comes with a price tag that most countries can't afford. The Ashkelon desalination plant cost $250 million to build. Sorek came in at $450 million. The brand new Sorek 2 facility, over $500 million. And that's just construction. Add in the national water carrier systems, the pipelines, the pumping stations, and the infrastructure to distribute all this water, and you're looking at another $500 million at minimum. Then there's the operational cost. Running these plants requires constant energy, maintenance, and technical expertise. Israel produces desalinated water at roughly 0.54 per cubic meter, which is efficient by global standards. But in many other countries, that cost doubles or even triples. For nations already struggling with debt, war, and collapsing economies, building a desalination network at Israel's scale simply isn't realistic. The question haunting the Middle East is whether Israel's model can even be replicated. Some experts believe it can, but only if governments prioritize water infrastructure over everything else. Others argue that without the financial resources, political stability, and technological base that Israel has, most nations are stuck watching from the sidelines while their water disappears. The technology exists. Desalination plants can be built almost anywhere there's access to seawater. So why haven't Iran, Iraq, or other struggling nations followed Israel's lead? The answer is complicated, and it's not just about money. Iran has tried. They've announced multiple desalination projects over the years, but corruption Mismanagement and international sanctions have sabotaged nearly every attempt. Investigative reports have exposed networks within Iran's power structures that profit from water scarcity. These groups, sometimes called the water mafia, allegedly control water access, manipulate contracts, and drain funds meant for infrastructure. As long as they benefit from the crisis, there's little incentive to fix it. Iraq's problems are different but just as crippling. Decades of war have destroyed the country's infrastructure and left the government too weak to invest in large-scale projects. What little money exists often disappears into corruption or gets redirected to military spending. Meanwhile, upstream neighbors like Turkey and Iran have built dams that choke the flow of the Tigris and Euphrates, leaving Iraq with less water every year. They're stuck in a cycle they can't break. Israel, by contrast, treated water as a matter of national security from the very beginning. When droughts hit hard in the early 2000s, the government didn't hesitate. They poured resources into desalination, funded research, and built infrastructure at breakneck speed. It wasn't just an environmental project, it was a survival strategy. That kind of focused commitment is rare, and it made all the difference. Israel isn't slowing down. By 2030, they plan to produce 1.1 billion cubic meters of desalinated water annually. That's enough to support a growing population and expand agricultural output even further. But some researchers are asking whether even this will be enough. Studies on population growth and water demand suggest that Israel's system could face stress again in the coming decades. If climate change accelerates faster than expected, desalination might not keep up. And then there's the bigger regional picture. As Middle Eastern nations grow more desperate, water is becoming a flashpoint for conflict. Rivers that cross borders are already sources of tension. Turkey's dams infuriate Iraq and Syria. Iran's water policies strain relations with Afghanistan. Rumors circulate about future water wars where nations fight not over oil or territory, but over access to rivers and aquifers. Israel's position in all this is unique. They've essentially removed themselves from the natural water cycle by relying on desalination and recycling. That gives them independence, but it also isolates them. Neighbors who depend on Israeli water are both grateful and resentful. The power dynamic is fragile, and it's hard to predict how long it will hold. If you're still watching, hit that subscribe button now, because you won't want to miss our next deep dive into how water politics are quietly reshaping the entire Middle East. So here's where we land. Israel solved their water crisis with technology, investment, and relentless focus. They turned the ocean into an unlimited resource and transformed wastewater into agricultural gold. No one can deny the engineering achievement, but the environmental cost is real. The Mediterranean is absorbing toxic brine on a scale that worries scientists. The energy demands keep rising, and the carbon footprint isn't going away. Meanwhile, their neighbors are still suffering. Iran might evacuate its capital. Iraq's rivers are dying. Jordan is stuck in dependency, and Israel sits in the middle, secure in their water supply, exporting the surplus, and reshaping regional politics with every deal they sign. This raises a question that nobody wants to answer. Is desalination really a solution, or is it just buying time? Are we solving the water crisis, or are we creating new environmental problems that future generations will pay for? And in a region where power and survival are inseparable, can water ever be just a resource, or will it always be a weapon? The Middle East is running out of time. The droughts are getting worse, the rivers are shrinking, and as climate change tightens its grip, every country is going to face a choice: innovate like Israel did, or collapse like so many others are doing right now. But even innovation has its limits. The ocean might be endless, but the damage we do to it isn't. And at some point, we're going to have to face the cost of what we've built. Water is the new oil. Whoever controls it controls the future. And right now, Israel is winning that game. The question is, at what price?